So I thought it was about time to do a little update on the 40-gallon vivarium. So I did a video on the build for this vivarium, the background there with the expanding foam and putting in the wood and doing the hardscaping and all that fun stuff. And I did a video on the plants, and I think this vivarium, terrarium, whatever you want to call it, is about 3 months old now because I did that build video back in February, and so I think things are doing pretty well. For the most part, you can see that Hoytonia has really grown in there, and in fact it's gotten leggier also and less of a ground cover. You can see it reaching up pretty high above the driftwood already. This Dendrobium orchid is doing pretty well. It sent up that completely new shoot, which is very long. And the cardamom plant back there is doing all right. These leaves definitely have the look of a plant that would appreciate more sun. See how pale they are. So it's sort of a borderline plant, I would say, for trying to grow in a terrarium. And the carnivorous plant is doing pretty well back here, and it's grown a completely new leaf fairly quickly, and some of its old pictures have already dried up. And I don't know why, but I'm blanking on the name of these right now, but I'll come back to that. This baby's tear stuff wasn't doing that great at first. I think it likes a lot of sun, and where I first collected it, it was growing much lower to the ground and looked really good that way. It's stretching a lot more, showing that it could use more light, but now it actually gets a little bit of natural light, and I think that's helping it. My mosses aren't doing that well. This one right here, the one that is sort of flat, is doing pretty well. That one down there. But these other mosses aren't doing very well, and I think what is actually happening, you can see these mosses in here aren't looking that great. And I think what's happening is the isopods are actually, there's too many isopods, and I think they're actually starting to damage some of the plants, especially the mosses. And other than that, everything's pretty good plant-wise, and there's definitely a good crew of detritivores. I think there's a little bit too many of the isopods now. They've been breeding in there. There's a few millipedes, which create these really big tunnels in the substrate, and there are some earthworms, and not a very big population of springtails that I ever see, but there's definitely a lot of isopods. You can see one there. My most disappointing plants in here are the ones that I got from Glass Box Tropicals, and I got a couple of bromeliads from them and some margravia, and you can see there's one margravia that's still alive here and a teeny bit of another one here, but this one hasn't grown, and oh geez, it looks like it doesn't have any roots anymore. But I've been trying to be super careful with them because they were hardly rooted at all when I got them, and they were just in a little bit of sphagnum moss. But I'm trying to get this one to grow. It looks like right now it's just using up the energy that it probably has in its stem. I don't want to dig up the roots to see, but they were very tender plants when I got them. I got a couple bromeliads which didn't have roots on them either, so I'm just trying to get that one to root in here. But I finally decided to take the other ones to the nursery because I think they actually need to be in more of a propagation, in more of a controlled setting to get them to root at first. But today I'm going to put a couple new mosses in here to sort of back up the population that I started, and I'm going to do a couple other little adjustments. as you saw, I did a couple things in here. I cut the Hoytonia chameleon plant back a little bit, and I also had this Dendrobium orchid, which is considered a leggy orchid, and I had no problem with the idea of legginess. And I planted it in this tank, and I planted some of it also in my 15-gallon tank, which is even smaller, obviously. But even in here, in this big tank, that new shoot from the orchid was going up so high, I thought it was going to reach the top of the terrarium. And so I started bending it, and you can see that I've got it there curved over so that it will fit. So starting off with sort of what you would consider a problem, basically having a plant choice that is not optimal for the size of the terrarium, and then turning it into a challenge, a fun experiment, and a chance to do a little bit of sort of bonsai. I happen to have this little bit of this bonsai wire, which is this really thin wire that can be bent back and forth many times before it breaks. And so I'm really glad that I have that. And you can't even really see it in there, but it's hanging on the orchid and pulling it down to the ground. So I think that'll be cool from a composition perspective. I also worked on this, I think it's called baby's tears down here, and basically pushed it down and also sprinkled some more substrate onto it because I want it to be less leggy, and I want to get it to be, if possible, a lower, tighter to the ground carpeting plant. And I think the easiest way to do that, to make it grow that way, would be to increase the amount of lights that I have on it, because it seems to grow that way outdoors. But I don't plan on getting any more lights anytime soon, so I'm going to try this other technique for getting it to grow a little bit lower on the ground. I'm also going to work a little bit up here on this, the Nepenthes carnivorous plant, and try to get this new one that's coming out to be growing off of the ledge, and I'll probably use the same wire for that. But anyways, that's it for the update. Just wanted to show what's going on in the 40-gallon tank.